International arena, planes and helicopters packed with rescue workers and supplies landed for the first time on Wednesday on remote Indonesian islands that were pounded by a 10-foot tsunami, sweeping away villages and leaving at least 272 people dead and more than 400 missing.
The first aerial surveys of the region revealed huge swathes of land underwater and the crumbled rubble of homes torn apart by the wave. One lay titled resting on the edge of its red roof with tires and slabs of concrete piled up on the surrounding sand. 2 days after a powerful earthquake triggered the wave, the casualty count was still rising as rescuers and disaster officials finally reached the Mentawai island chain, which was closer to the epicenter and the worst hit. Bad weather had kept them away. President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono cut short a state visit to Vietnam to deal with 2 major disasters that struck Indonesia in less than 24 hours. The country's most volatile volcano, Mount Merapi, 800 miles to the east, erupted at dusk Tuesday, sending up surge and ash clouds and killing more than 24 people. On Wednesday evening, disaster officials at Edward nearly doubled the earthquake and tsunami casualty estimates to 272 dead with 412 missing. He said the rescuers who landed Wednesday received new casualty reports from village chiefs. Both the quake and the volcanic eruption fell along Indonesia's portion of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a series of fault lines that are prone to earthquake and volcano activity stretching from the Western Hemisphere through Japan and Southeast Asia. Rough seas and bad weather have hampered tsunami relief operations, leaving islanders to fend for themselves. With not enough people to dig graves, corpses littered beaches and roads, according to District Chief Edison Salelo Baja. Fishermen were scouring waters in search of survivors. The first cargo plane loaded with 16 tons of tents, medicine, food and clothes arrived Wednesday afternoon, said Edward. 4 helicopters also had landed in Sikakap, a town of North Pagai Island, which will be the center of relief operations. Disaster officials were still trying to reach more than a dozen villages on the Mentawai, a popular surface destination that is usually reachable only by a 12-hour boat ride. But they were preparing for the worst on Wednesday, with hundreds of body bags being sent to the area, said Mujiharto, who heads the Health Ministry's crisis center. A 7.7 magnitude quake that struck late Monday, just 30 miles beneath the ocean floor, was followed by at least 14 aftershocks, the largest measuring 6.2. The fault line on Sumatra Island's coast in the same one that caused the 2004 quake and most Indian Ocean tsunami that killed 230,000 people in a dozen countries.
On a happier note, scientists in Europe have announced a new and more potent double-strain polio vaccine that is reportedly more effective than triple and single vaccines. This means children in high-risk areas can be immunized against 2 important strains of the debilitating disease in a single dose.
The paper, quote in the World Health Organization, said research on the bivalent oral polio vaccine found that it induced a significantly higher immune response than triple vaccines. The new oral polio vaccine is effective against type 1 and 3 polio virus simultaneously. The vaccine is made for WHO's vaccination programs by various international drug companies, including British and Indian firms. The scientists, in their study between August and December 2008, analyzed data from 830 newborn babies from 3 centers in India. The infants received either the monovalent, bivalent or trivalent vaccines in 2 doses, once at birth, the other after 30 days. Despite the use of single and triple vaccines, polio is endemic in Afghanistan, India, Nigeria and Pakistan, which countries have reported 153 cases of types 1 and 3 this year. There have also been outbreaks in Angola, Chad and Democratic Republic of Congo, and a suspected outbreak in Sudan. Many other countries have also had cases of polio so far this year, resulting in a total of 732 cases across the world.
World leaders arrive in Vietnam on Wednesday ahead of the 10-Nation Association of Southeast Asian Nations ASEAN Summit and its 3 dialogue partners, South Korea, China and Japan, which is due to open on Thursday. The leaders were welcomed by the Vietnamese president at a ceremony at the Presidential Palace in the capital Hanoi. They are expected to launch a last-ditch plea this week for free and fair elections in military-run Myanmar. Aside from reclusive Myanmar, China is expected to take center stage at the annual summit following a series of territorial spats that had rattled regional nerves. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and several other dignitaries will join discussions at the conference, which opens on Thursday in Vietnam's capital Hanoi. Around 300 demonstrators supporting the Myanmar's opposition took to streets of Tokyo on Wednesday, calling for a boycott of elections scheduled for the 7th of November.
The political party of detained pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi, which has opted out of upcoming elections, has said that the poll will only prolong military dictatorship in Myanmar and noted that citizens had the right not to vote. The ruling regime has billed the elections as a key step towards democracy after 5 decades of military rule. But critics say that oppressive rules governing campaigning, the repression of main opposition party and the new constitution ensures that the military will continue its command and role after the polls. A statement by Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, seen on Tuesday night, said the election on November 7th would merely activate a 2008 constitution, which does not guarantee ethnic rights, civil rights, basic human rights and other democratic rights. The National League for Democracy's statement also called on voters to file complaints with police if they are coerced by anyone to vote. Suu Kyi, the Nobel Prize laureate still under house arrest, said earlier the citizens have the right not to vote and that forcing others to vote amounts to breaking the law. She has carefully avoided asking voters to take any specific action, evidently to avoid prosecution under broadly defined laws. Her party won the last election in 1990 but was not allowed to take power by the ruling military, which has kept Suu Kyi jailed or under house arrest for 15 of the last 21 years. The government dissolved her party because it declined to register for the elections, widely expected to be won by the government-backed United Solidarity and Development Party.
Violent clashes break out between Palestinian Israelis and Israeli police in response to a demonstration by members of a right-wing Jewish group in the town of al-Fahm in northern Israel. Israeli police fired tear gas at a crowd of Palestinian Israelis who had gathered to protest against the march by about 70 Our Land of Israel supporters throughout the mainly Arab town. The Jewish protesters were calling for the Islamic movement led by Sheikh Raed Salah to be made illegal. Dozens of young Palestinians threw stones at police who had been deployed to prevent a repeat of the violence that took place last year. The police responded with tear gas and baton charges. 15 of the Palestinian demonstrators were injured. No Land of Israel protesters were arrested, but 10 from the Palestinian side were. Plainclothes Israeli police officers were seen among the Palestinian protesters with handguns firing shots. Protesters have said that they believe ammunition was used, a charge which Israeli police deny. Hundreds of riot police were deployed in anticipation of violence on Tuesday. Other units are also on alert across northern Israel and helicopters were patrolling the skies. But while police acted to separate the marchers from the town's population, the messages on their signs that Israel should be cleansed of its Palestinian inhabitants were still visible.